Welcome to CIOTV, ladies and gentlemen, an initiative of Accent Infomedia and sister concern of Enterprise IT World. Today, I have Jeff Schmitz, Senior Vice President and CMO at Zebra Technologies. Jeff is responsible for driving preference of the Zebra brand with the customers, partners, and employees, as well as creating a new source of revenue. Jeff oversees traditional marketing functions, the company's partner program, and business and marketing intelligence, along with philanthropy and volunteerism. Jeff has held executive leadership positions for more than 25 years, including at Spirent Communications, Visual Network, and Telabs. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, computer science from Marquette University, and a master's degree in computer science from Illinois Institute of Technology. And he's a regular speaker in various B2B forums and companies around embracing digital technologies. So warm welcome, Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
I'm good, Sanjay. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate this great honor of this awards. Thank you.
What is the sentiment you are seeing in the marketplace?
Thanks, Sanjay. It's a good question. So let's kind of rewind the clock maybe to the beginning of the year, when I think in most countries we started to see the spread of COVID from Asia to Europe to North America, and what we saw in many cases kind of a rolling shutdown, and businesses of all sizes except essential businesses were shut down. Now, to understand the rest of the answer to this question, you need to understand a little bit about Zebra maybe. So the markets that we serve globally, our number one market is retail, and that would include both brick and mortar and e-commerce. Secondarily, manufacturing, transportation and logistics, and healthcare and manufacturing. Those are our spaces. So it covers a big swath of kind of B2B in industrial spaces, as well as retail and healthcare. Now, what we saw is many of the larger customers, Sanjay, who were essential, they stayed open. And what they found is, if they were in e-commerce, they had to scale very rapidly. Or in the case of retail, essential retail was open, but they were trying to find ways to do alternative fulfillment, contactless delivery, things like buy online, pick up in store, as an example. So those larger essential firms on both the brick and mortar and e-commerce, we'll focus on retail, were absolutely focused on how do we scale and change that business and digitize their business. That's what we do. So I think for those large essential businesses, they had to continue going. I'll throw in their healthcare as well. So what we saw in healthcare was, well, a lot of elective surgeries were being postponed. Mm-hmm. There was an urgent need for remote and drive-through testing. So the idea of scaling up specimen collection, and what needs to happen there that Zebra does is track and trace that through the entire process, everything from the collection at let's say a mobile testing station, in through every step in the lab. Those are labeled, scanned, tracked, and traced. So we saw that kind of boom hit in a lot of ways in healthcare. And we also saw pop-up hospitals, which we were supporting with our technology. So what we saw is kind of feast and famine. In retail, essential workers, and healthcare, we saw a boom in applications and a desire to digitize because the scale was moving rapidly. But then we saw small, medium businesses just shut down, and that business shut down, or non-essential business like retail fashion just stop. And what we're starting to see is, and again, it depends on, as you know, by country, we're starting to see things open up, both in the small and medium businesses, as well as the large businesses are continuing to move forward. And they all see, for them to survive, they all need to digitize, and they all need to invest in technology. So we are seeing, we started to see a comeback. Q1 was kind of flat, Q2 first was down, and I suspect we're going to see an improvement going forward as those businesses open.
Okay, Jeff, you must agree with me that the pandemic has actually changed the complete business dynamic. There is no region immune from the effect. Working from home, you are subscribing. I think most of the population are subscribing to digital or online things, e-learning, e-medicine, everything on e-way. So being a marketeer, what is the kind of innovation that you are thinking can attract and create a niche in the market, not only for your brand, but on an average for others as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned digitization. It's what we do as a business, and it's certainly where we're going as a marketing team. And I think what you've seen is, like you said, everything is moving to online and digitization. And I think that that step function and change is going to continue. And it also affects marketing. And let me start by saying the first thing that I think you need to think about is your brand when you go into these kinds of crises. And I think everyone needs to think about, okay, how do I want to represent my brand in these scenarios? And the first thing that I think we did as a company that I think was the good move is we said, look, let's put aside everything other than helping our customers. So in our case, we support the front line of business. So we have devices, scanners, printers, mobile computers in nurses' hands, in sales associates' hands, in people who are picking in an e-commerce environment. And our first thought was, how can we help them? How can we help them stay safe? How do we get information out there with our brand that helps them understand, how do I clean these devices? How do I stay safe? We even offered a proximity and contact tracing solution with our devices when they come in contact so people could stay safe. And our focus wasn't so much on selling. Our focus from a brand perspective became first and foremost helping our end users and then promoting our end users because, again, we support essential workers and frontline workers, so it was a natural for us to do that. I think on the marketing front, you're right. Content is always king, but the digitization of marketing has become more important. How do you do virtual events has become an important thing. How do you stay engaged with your customers, and in our case, our partners, through a virtual method? And how do you do that in an effective way? What's the best way to keep their attention? By the way, we know that people on virtual events, after the first 5 minutes, they start fading out. And in about 15 minutes, most people aren't paying attention. So how do you grab their attention and keep it when you can't meet face-to-face? That's been probably a second challenge. And the third one, I think, is, we were already, I think, all as a community moving more and more at different paces towards digital marketing. And this has exacerbated that because a lot of the experiential marketing has gone away. And so just like I think our customers are having a step function in digitization, we're seeing that also on the marketing side. And I don't think we'll ever go all the way back to what it was before. I think we're in a new normal.
Okay, Jeff, in addition to this, a related question, you are already there in the core of automation as a company, Zebra. Now, in addition to the automation, there are AI substantial, so artificial intelligence, which is getting added into it while tracking the things. And that's also being utilized by marketeers in terms of looking at the leads, looking at how many people are watching, how many people are tapping into those advertisements, or even on ground also. These technologies are being used. To what extent, or what is your view on AI, for example, getting integrated into the marketing? Even I know that your devices have got all these things integrated, and going forward, it will have more and more integration as IoT becoming prominent everywhere, data being driven to a single place, from edge computing to the core. So from a marketer point of view, how AI, big data being utilized, and how yourself, particularly within your organization, what is your plan? What is your thinking around that?
Yeah, I think this falls in the same line as what we talked about before, is digitization and that expansion. When we think about our products, and I would apply it to marketing as well, is we do it under kind of a structure of sensing what's going on, analyzing and acting. We follow that same kind of principle in marketing. So a few years ago, we decided that it was really important as we move toward digitization to also recognize the fact that digitization is only as good as not just the content, but the analytics. And we made analytics one of the pillars of marketing. And as a result, we're able now better to, when people are on our properties or how they're engaging with us, we have a better ability to sense that because we went out and made sure we collected the data. So even if I don't know who you are, how do I collect the data on what you're doing, how you're engaging with Zebra and with the brand? How do I use that data then to engage with you further in terms of analyzing data? So if I know what you've read, if I know what you've seen on my webpage, and I know you're interested in a particular product or a particular vertical, how the next time you come to my website do I serve up new information to you? So eventually, you're willing to say, hey, there's something content that you have, Zebra, that I want. Here's my email address. And then how do we put the right kind of information in front of you on a regular basis? Because you have to find a way to sense what's going on, analyze that data, and then act on it by sending you another email, or even if you're just an IP address to me, presenting you with new data. And then what we've done in the final stage of acting is then how do I alert my sellers to what we're doing as well? So if there's someone who's interested in something, and it may not even be a lead, if it's a partner or a customer is interested, how do I then, when it comes to transitioning them from the digital world to the physical world, how do I engage the sales team? How do I send alerts to sellers? And a partner is interested in selling a different product line, or an end user is starting to sniff around a particular product. Maybe you need to take some action. So I think we've lived inside that sense, analyze, act structure, both on the product side and what we're delivering, but also on marketing.
So also you have utilized the social media to the maximum, to the optimum of its capacity?
It's hard to say, Sanjay, that anybody's doing anything to the maximum, right? I think there's always improvements in every area, but a lot of what I talked about is data that we can get at both on our own website in terms of activity you're doing, but we also do listening on social media. So I think we've used social media. There's obviously a wealth of information in social media that and on digital forms that allows us to hyper target customers that might be interested in the products and services that we sell. And we use that as best we can, for sure. And we certainly have been working and growing our engagements pretty rapidly on our own sites as well. So whether it's a paid engagement or if it's our own social media sites, we're using that extensively. And again, using the data we do have, to our advantage.
All right, Jeff. Now, a question which is related to Zebra Technologies. To my understanding, the marketers are the storytellers, that the way you narrate the story, the narrative changes the market perception. And in difficult times, a good marketer tells or narrates the story that way. It takes the brand to a different league altogether. You have got competition. Every company has got competition. So what has been your storytelling during this time? Maybe 2 quarters starting from the pandemic, or else I can take back for last 12 months. How has been your storytelling? How have you engaged the customers? How have you helped your brand to be different? Of course, you are in a different league altogether, but always competition is a competition. How have you differentiated from the competition through your story?
Yeah. So I think I love the setup for this, Sanjay, because I think ultimately that is a marketer's job, is to be a storyteller. So let me tell you a little bit of our journey and maybe our story. As I mentioned before, we very much sit in the hands of those on the front line of business. So whether it's a nurse, working with a patient, or if it's a sales associate working with a customer, or if it's a third-party delivery person delivering a package to your home that maybe you ordered through e-commerce. We're the mobile computers, the printers, the scanners, the barcoding, the tracking and tracing that makes all that possible. And when we started our new brand journey, we tried to really focus and hone in on our ability to create a performance edge for those on the front line of business. That led us right into a mode at the beginning of COVID, when I think about the next phase, where we quickly tried to celebrate what those folks were doing and keep them safe. And the focus was less on selling, but it was more on supporting those frontline workers. And we had to quickly move to that mode of storytelling, but I think we had to just as quickly move away from it. And anybody who was watching any television or was on, watching ads on even on social media or in digital form, you saw everyone started jumping in and supporting essential workers. And it actually became a little bit of a negative at some point. So while we switched to it rather quickly, we launched our largest global campaign ever with the greatest social engagement in the fastest time frame ever. We also turned it off very quickly because people were kind of turning off to that message. It was a great message. It gave people great pride in their country and in what they were doing and those workers, but it quickly turned. And then we had to change the narrative and turn that off. And then we had to move to this mode of rapid acceleration and digitization in our customers' businesses, because we could see that 2 things were happening. One is digitization for those who were open was growing like crazy, and the people who were home were just not working. So we had this kind of Y-shaped recovery where we had the haves and the have-nots. And we wanted to message to both the haves that, hey, you can start scaling, but to the have-nots, you better get ready, because when you come back, the competitive world's going to change. So I think if there's anything I would say about storytelling is, one, you should get good at it if you're not. And two is get ready, because things change really quickly. And just when you have a perfect plan, things change. And I think in these times, that's probably exacerbated, and you need to be ready to be agile.
All right, Jeff, a couple of more questions. One is that uh, people are saying that the marketing fund getting squeezed, and but this is the time that the marketers should invest more funds. What is your take on that? And secondly, which are the areas that you have or you are thinking of or you have demarcated that the investment should go going forward?
So first of all, let me say that, as I often say, first of all, you could always spend more money, and I think everyone's got to be happy with the budget they have and figure out the way to make the most of it. That's the best possible scenario. And I would secondarily say that one of the CMO's jobs, but it's true of anybody in marketing, is to make sure that the language that we use resonates with the C-suite. And people, all my friends who don't work at Zebra often send me articles that come out on a regular basis that the CMOs have the shortest tenure in the C-suite, Sanjay, which I think they sent to me in a loving tribute. But the reality of that is, the reason that CMOs tend to have a short lifespan is because we talk different language. We talk about impressions, leads, MQLs, SQLs, social engagements, web visits. And the language of the C-suite is revenue, gross margin, EBITDA. And it's hard for some businesses to really build a solid attribution model. And if you can't do that, and it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard for companies like Zebra, by the way, where we don't sell directly or online. So we don't see a lot of the actual transaction data because we sell 80% through partners. So if you can't make that connection, and if you can't turn the marketing language into the language of the C-suite, it can be really challenging. And I think your budgets are more at risk if they don't understand the impact you're having on the business, and you can't always see it. That's number one. Secondly, look, when times are tough, I always tell people, look, marketing tends to have a high program spend to people spend more than most. Sales is largely headcount related, engineering largely headcount related function. But for marketing, it's a heavy program spend. And that means two things in my mind. One is, I think it's your corporate responsibility when things get really tough to look at that program budget and cut it if it makes sense. And number two is, I think the money you have to use wisely. And that goes to your second question. I think our focus has been on a few areas. One is on brand, which we talked about. The other one is changing kind of the way we go to market. We were very much a product company. We focused on product launch. We want to focus beyond that. How do we focus on not just the benefits to the end user? How do we focus on the partners? How do we make noise not just at launch, but through the life cycle? And how do we celebrate our entire portfolio, not individual products? We've invested in that. We've also invested in the way we go to market in terms of, we talked about analytics, and we talked about digital. And I think those are the three components, the four components, right, that we really focus on. And that's where I'd spend my money, is I'd look at all those areas. But it's hard to not want to over-index on, one, get your content straight, and then analytics and data would probably be the first things on the list.
All right, Jeff, if you permit me, I can pitch in with another very tricky question, is that these days, people are again saying, being a journalist, I'm also hearing that marketeers are becoming new sales heads. Is it true? How do you take this?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the business. What you're seeing in some cases is CMOs are turning to CROs, Chief Revenue Officers.
Right.
And I think it depends on the business model you're in. I think the clearer indication that if you're building an online sales engine, and most of your business is coming through e-commerce or through your website, then it's hard to not view the CMO as the CRO. And if your business is moving towards that, and most are, it's hard to not see that. Now, I will say that when we relooked at marketing and we came up with these pillars, that's one of the key things we noticed is marketing has been moving from a support function, how do we support sales, to one that we're starting to drive more revenue. And even in Zebra, through our partners, we are showing up on, some of our products show up on marketplaces. And in those cases, that revenue is much more attributable and trackable to what marketing is doing than what sales is doing. So you're definitely seeing a move, but every business model is different. Some are moving faster and slower. Some are more revenue oriented, some are less, but I think everyone's moving in that direction.
All right, Jeff, what would be your piece of advice to your peers? Maybe that they need a bit of good wishes in your competition in other industries also. Yeah. What do you want to say to them?
I mean, again, if I talk to marketers, the first thing I say is what we talked about before is make sure that people understand what marketing is doing. And let me tell it to you, and I tell this story often to executives to get them going, is you may not understand what marketing does or all our jargon, but you know the buyer's journey is changing. And let me give you the example. When I was a young guy, which now was a long time ago, and believe it or not, we had cars back then, Sanjay. Okay. And you went in to buy a car, you might say, I want something sporty. What do you have? Right? Mm-hmm. Or you have a general idea what you wanted. Who goes to buy a car now where you haven't configured the car online? You know exactly what you want. You know all the options. You know the color, and you likely know if they have the car sitting in the lot. That's the kind of way that journey has changed for everyone. All the investigation of your products and your services is happening online, and very little of it happens once a salesperson sits down with someone. And I think that story needs to be better understood at the C-suite. And then secondly, you've got to find a way to translate marketing jargon to C-suite language. And I think I would tell those two things are really imperative for anyone leading a marketing team today.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for sparing so much of time, Jeff, so early in the morning. And I believe these kinds of conversation will inspire many of the people. And stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Jeff.
Thanks, Sanjay, for having me.